DD 2019 is now behind us. But like many developers who, we fled San Francisco, are at least the most honest, we are still processing some of the lessons we picked up from the many great talks at this year's show. Inspired by blogger Chris Zakowski, we at Gamasutra have reached into our own camera phones and grabbed the slides that left a specific impression on us. Whether you were at DD this year and missed these talks, or could not attend for various reasons, we hope our takeaways help you with your own game development process. Chris Graft. To kick things off, here's 2 slides from Editor-in-Chief Chris Graft. As phone that managed to survive being in constant proximity to Gracie Carl's foot. Graft, in his classic game Post-Mortem, on Sega's Panzer Dragoons V, and Panzer Dragoon Saga, the actor and series creator Yukio Futatsuki of that game's studio, Grounding, was candid about the internal pressure at Sega to make Saturn games that could compete visually with the original PlayStation. Sega's Saturn had superior 2D capabilities compared to PlayStation, but PlayStation had Saturn beat in terms of 3D graphics. For 3D games like Panzer Dragoon, Saturn developers had to implement rendering tricks that took advantage of the Saturn's 2D strengths. The pressure brought upon by intense focus on PlayStation as a competitor still has not left Futatsuki. Even to this day, I have a lingering trauma about this anytime someone mentions the original PlayStation. Those PlayStation Classic commercials made me real mad, he said. So, do not mention the original PlayStation around Futatsuki. Graft, in the session, interactive story without challenge, mechanics, the design of FIREWATCH, Campo Santos Chris Remo, outlined practical methods to make a narrative-focused game believable, reactive to player actions, and flexible in terms of game design tools. Remo, incidentally, a Gamasutra alum, cited a popular game dev called That's often attributed to Civilization creator Sid Meier. A game is a series of interesting decisions. Remo put his own spin on that when it comes to games like FIREWATCH. A good interactive narrative is a series of interesting outcomes. This stance is reflected in the way that Firewatch's narrative is incredibly reactive to player choices, not just through textual choices, but also to player actions. So many of these transparent decisions that players make were taken into account by Firewatch's writers and designers, who made sure even the smallest decisions had outcomes that would surprise and delight players. Alex Worrell, contributing editor Alex Worrell, had a lot of favorite slides, including an image of a children's slide emerging from the rear of an elephant sculpture. We will not be printing that one. Worrell, this slide. From Video Game History Foundation founder Frank C. for this talk on It's Still Emulation, Saving Video Game History Before It's Too Late, reminds us how important it is to have people who are working to preserve video game history. While a well-designed game can teach a player how to play, it takes an expert to teach you why the game was played and what that experience was like. Worrell, this slide. From the GDC 2019 talk on a fashion in most game sucks and why you should care, by Kit Fox Games, Victoria Chen, illustrates the 3 axes along which the fashion in your games communicates meaning to players. Worrell, veteran indie dev Jason Rohrer, threw up this slide during his talk on 2014 versus 2018, the shape of financial success, before and after the indie apocalypse, to reinforce one bit of advice. If you are worried about making a great game that nobody will buy, Look at your own play history, and try to create a game you actually play for long periods, rather than the kinds of games you keep telling yourself you do like to play. Warhol, in his GDC 2019 talk on making games that stand out and survive, Slime Rancher director Nick Popovich encouraged devs to think of their games in terms of animated GIFs. If someone can get your game in a single GIF, argues Popovich, then you have eliminated a lot of the friction that might keep them from buying a copy. Warhol, in this other two slides, second slide below, from Popovich's talk, devs are encouraged to create a place bar mode that feels like home, in order to give players a comfortable, low-stress place to head out, a return to without much friction. This encourages them to keep playing your game, even after long periods away, which in turn raises the odds that they will buy some DLC, or inspire a friend to buy a copy as well. Alyssa McAloon. Alyssa only had one favorite slide, but in a very on-brand fashion for her. It was about Hitman. McAloon. It's a slide that probably does not make much sense without a good helping of context, but still my favorite of the show. During Matt Potence and Anderson's talk on applying social anthropology principles to level design, she shared this color-coded map. It's a map of what many consider Hitman 2016 as very best level pins, but overlaid with color to define the 6 different kinds of public and private spaces that are found throughout Hitman's levels. You will have to check out my story on the talk on my Twitter thread on what I could not fit into my story on the talk for a full rundown. But in short, those different kinds of spaces each communicate a lot of information to players about their purpose and potential limitations, just through knowledge most have from everyday life. This was not a consideration when IO Interactive was making these levels. However, at least not consciously, Anderson was only an intern at the time and applied these terms and colors to the map as a way for her to better understand the team's level design practices and apply terminology to something that was, at the time, new to her. As an end result, Hitman's level design is more readable to a newcomer, and experienced designers have a better understanding of how spaces function and interact. This slide is a neat example of what fresh eyes bring to a project, and given that these terms carried on into the development of Hitman 2, an example of how new perspectives and sometimes even concepts from outside of game dev can lead to more informed design decisions. Bryant Francis. For my own favorite slides, see non-Gamasutra's GDC live tweeting. I pulled a few from talks that went outside my personal purview about narrative game design. GDC is a great opportunity for devs of different backgrounds to get a crash course in how their colleagues make games, and I thought it was important to expand my writer-oriented brain into the worlds of business, AI, and animation. Francis. First, there's this slide from Sophie Brennan's talk on the animation of Otto Octavius from Marvel's Spider-Man. Octavius comes off as an effortless creation when you are playing Insomniac's superhero game. But watching Brennan break down how atypical his rig was proved to be an incredible experience at GDC. Brennan's slide here contrasts to a prior slide that showed the results of creating an individual rig for each of Octavius' tentacles. She followed up by breaking down a lot of the pseudocode and mathematic principles that helped drive the character's unusual limbs. This particular slide struck me as a good shorthand for how Brennan and her colleagues at Insomniac conceptualized the animation process for Octavius. It's one thing to just say, it's a Spider-Man game. We will have Doc Ock on his sleeves, we'll do Doc Ock things. But without a real prop to move around, like in the Sam Raimi film Spider-Man 2, it's difficult to imagine how you could tell a computer to seamlessly manipulate such odd limbs. At GDC, Brandon did a stellar job explaining that conceptualization process to the crowd. Francis, this slide comes from Johnny's Photos talk on the development of Subnautica, which charted the game's course from a 6-month